Welcome to Tina Tries. When your kids, and you, admit it, really love Bluey, this is what happens. Let's print an 11-pound life-size Bluey next on Tina Tries. Remember when I made a 325% bigger Mickey Mouse figure? This time, I wanted to print a life-size figure without having to resize any of the STLs. This paid file is by Yosh Studios and can be found on yoshstudios.com. This was printed on an H2D and an X1 carbon in white PLA. This took over 100 hours to print and used just over 6 kilograms of filament. You heard that right. 6 kilograms. You'll also need some miter apple with the activator spray and some acrylic paints. As usual, I will link everything in the description below. Let's check out the build. Bluey here is by far my biggest print to date. The printing process was really easy. You can't consolidate pieces onto plates if you have a bigger printer. I printed this over the course of several days and it was well worth the wait. I didn't have any failures and everything fit together really well right off of the print bed. So after opening 7 spools of filament and waiting several days for the print to complete, it was time to start the build process. I started by gluing the 2 sections of her torso together, and I used a lot of miter apple. These 2 sections are very dense and heavy, and I did not want this to fall apart while it was being played with. So I definitely went overboard with the glue. As you can see, there's a seam all the way around, and this was before I had my wood burning tool. Had I had the wood burning tool at the time, I would have used that to smooth out as much of the glue line as I could, but since I didn't have that, I tried using a hand sander. I tried sanding it down as best I could with the hand sander and using some 80 grit sandpaper. I spent about half an hour trying to sand this down, but as you can see, it didn't do a whole lot of good. So once I determined that it was as smooth as it was going to get with the tools that I had, I started painting all of the individual pieces. I figured it would be easier to paint this and then assemble it than to glue it all together and try to paint this while holding it. That would have been extremely awkward. So painting all of the individual pieces beforehand was definitely the right decision. I used my usual apple barrel paints for this one, and for most of the colors, I used them straight out of the bottle, which I don't normally do. My reasoning for that was I knew my kids were going to play with this, and this was before I knew about Mod Podge as a sealant, so I figured she was going to get scuffed up and need a paint refresh at some point. The only color that I made custom was her dark purpley blue color here, which I made by mixing navy blue, black, and purple together. The downside to making my own color is that if those areas get scuffed up, I can't repair them. However, I wanted that color to be cartoon accurate, so I made my own. Had I known about Mod Podge sealant at the time, I definitely would have doused her in it after I assembled her. After painting, I started assembly. Assembly started with her hood. The advantage to using the miter apple is that once I had the hood where I wanted it to be, the activator spray instantly locked it into place. For the remaining assembly, each of the main pieces used pegs to keep them in place. All of the pegs printed on one plate and are the exact same size, so you can use them interchangeably. And a few extras are also printed at the same time. That way, if you break any or you lose them, you have the replacements on hand. First, I attached her ears and the middle yellow sections inside of her ears. Next, I added her snout, Then I glued her eyes into place. The eyes did take a bit of coaxing to get them situated perfectly. They have to go through both the hood and into the torso, so getting that lined up is a little bit tricky, but there are little rims on the inside of each of her eyes to help align them with each side of her hood. Then I glued the nose on, followed by the gray dot on the end of her nose. After that, I glued her teeth into place, followed by her eyebrows. Next up, I glued the hands to each of the arms and attached the arms to the main body. Her belly patch went on next. I glued the feet onto the legs and then glued the legs in place. After that, I glued the two tail pieces together and attached the tail to the body. It is really important when you attach the tail that you put it on pointing down. She is very top heavy and you need that tail as a counterbalance. The last step was attaching the 3 dots on her back. Each of the dots had a different size peg, so the placement for each was very easily determined. And that is the final assembled life-size Bluey. If I was going to build this again, I think I would try something other than miter apple to keep this together. I would probably try something like an OD clear primer for PVC pipes. That is a solvent which kind of melts the top layer of the plastic so that when you put them together, they bond instantly. So that would eliminate any of the glue peeking out of the seams and hopefully keep the pieces locked into place. I'm finding that over time, the miter apple is becoming sort of brittle and some of the pieces do break off if the kids bump into it or knock it over. We have had breakages. All of the pegs that keep her pieces in place fit really well, but I made the mistake of printing them in PLA. If I was to do this again, I would definitely print them in PETG or something much tougher than PLA. If the kids knocked her over, odds were pretty high that something was going to break off. PETG at a minimum is definitely the way to go with those pegs. After 8 months of playtime and love, Bluey was definitely in need of some repairs. I have tried to patch up some spots where she was coming apart with some wood filler. I'm going to sand those down and then I am going to paint over that wood filler. And her little feet here are in definite need of another coat of paint. So let's get to it. So I'm starting with a 220 grit sandpaper. Try and smooth this out a little bit. Then I'm going to go in with a 400 grit and really smooth it out. So I am going to get a wet paper towel and wipe all of the dust from sanding off of her before I start painting. So now I can get to painting over these parts that I've patched, and then I'm gonna add a new coat of paint to her feet here. So I'm using my usual apple barrel acrylic paints on this. I'm using a light blue and a summer sky. And I'm just using a really large flat brush for this since she has a lot of area. So let's get to it. I'm just gonna cover over the parts that I added the wood filler to. Let that dry and then I will go back in and give it another coat. So while that's drying, I am gonna give her feet a fresh coat of paint. Now we're gonna
do a second coat on all of the seams that I fixed. 2 of my seams need 1 more coat, and then she should be okay. So there we have our battle damage patched up Bluey. Here is our fully restored and well-loved Bluey. She has endured almost a year of playtime and has held up surprisingly well, all things considered. This was a really fun project to put together, and if you decide to build your own, here are a few things to keep in mind. Print your pegs in PETG. Paint all of your pieces before assembly, and seal your finished piece with Mod Podge after you glue everything together to avoid any scuffs. If you have little ones who are smaller than Bluey, please do not set this within their reach. She is really heavy and tips over very easily, and I do not want any little ones getting hurt. Also, if you haven't checked out Bluey yet, I highly recommend it, even if you don't have kids. It is a delightful show. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. Let me know your favorite Bluey moment in the comment section below. I'll have another reaction video up very soon, and I will see you on the next one.